So, as you know, Stingray's my name, and you've probably heard that a few times now. But I was a rookie in IndyCar this last year with Dale Coyne with Rick Bear Racing in the 51 car you can see on the right side of the screen up there. And that's one of my favorite pictures because that's the last race of the year, going down the corkscrew in Monterey, California. And that was my best finish of the year. So that's a good memory there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give you guys some context to who I am because you probably have heard a kid named Stingray that drives race cars for a living that looks like I'm just telling a lie right now. But really, my name is Stingray. The reason for that is my parents were big Corvette fans. And so they decided to name me after the Stingray Corvette. And there's also more to the story. It's more boring, but I'm going to tell you guys it anyway so you can get your pillows out and take a nap while I say this part. But my dad's side of the family's heritage is from Stirlingshire, Scotland. And so Sting is actually short for Sterling. And both of my grandfathers had Ray in their name. And so we took the big, huge combination of wanting to be named after a race car and also having some heritage behind it and put it together. And here I am, unable to get an accounting job because no one wants to give my money to a kid named Stingray. But for more context, I was born and raised in Idaho, so there's no aquatic animals there either. I was not named after the fish. You can see on that top right picture, that's me actually 2 weeks ago in the Idaho mountains with my family elk hunting. So I got to chase some elk around and hiked about 20 miles in 2 days, and so I was unable to walk on day 3, but that was totally fine because race car drivers just, push gas pedals and brake pedals. It's totally fine. But I'm an only child, which is kind of funny because I have 4 half and 4 step siblings, 4 on my dad's side and 4 on my stepdad's side. But I'm the only one of my parents, so I claim myself to be an only child. And the reason that I'm here today, it's kind of funny. I've been to a couple of these, but I'm actually Molly Mitchell's boyfriend. And so this is an obligatory visit to the church. So we're just going to check that one off. And I have a signature board out back if anyone just wants to approve me being here for the day. That way Molly knows that I was actually here. No, I'm just kidding.
You think you're kidding.
Yeah.
We really are.
I should do that. That's a good idea. But yeah, there's no doubt God has made me who I am for a purpose. He's given me the right family, friends, mentors, teachers, and challengers in my life, all at the right time. He even gave me the right name, at least to be a race car driver. Like I said, the accountant job was out the window on day 1. So happy to be a race car driver here. And you see that John 3:30 verse. And that's just more context to who I would like to be. And that John 3:30 is, he must increase, but I must decrease. And it's John the Baptist talking about his role in serving Jesus. And so my hope is that John 3:16 you see on the side of the car is not just a way for me to get some clicks and some views on my page, but a way to impact some other people's lives. Because I know that the racing career doesn't last forever, and I will be shortly forgotten, but at least I want my impact to be more than just on myself and my family. I want it to be the people around me. That little red Corvette there, that was my first race car. That was pedal powered. And so I used to rip that thing around my parents' garage, and my dad would put cones up so I wouldn't hit his actual Corvette. I was riding that around. So that's how I got going. Now I'm a small town kid, more context to that. You see that top left picture, that's me and my favorite car that I've owned. That would have been my answer today. It was a 1973 Toyota Land Cruiser that I restored in high school with my dad. Did a motor swap on it and got stuck a few times in that thing. Broke down a few times, but that was all part of the fun. And then, like I said, I love to go hunting, so that was my first elk on the bottom left. Snow skiing in the winter, Idaho mountain. There's lots of water in that area, so go surfing, fishing, all those things, mountain biking. And then that little picture you can see where I'm wearing a red suit, that's me in a tomato suit. And I was at the local carnival. I was a super tomato that year. Context of who I am. I'm not just a race car driver, I'm a super tomato. Now, how I got here. You've heard the story about my name, and that's pretty much how I got started. I grew up going to Corvette club events and drag races and autocross events with my parents. And I actually took my first steps at a Corvette club meeting.
Wow.
And there's still a Corvette club member that says that I walked to him and he was the reason that I took my first steps. But I'm not so sure that's true, but it's a good claim to fame for him. But I used to sit in the backseat of my mom's car when I was around 3 years old and just say, faster, faster, faster. All I could think about. I love the feeling of sitting in my booster seat and getting pushed in the back of the seat. And that was from an early age. She would take off quickly from stop signs and traffic lights and race around in Idaho and hopefully not get pulled over too much, but she can usually sweet talk her way out of that, so didn't have to worry too much. But I started go-karting when I was 5. You see that picture on the top right? That's me in my parents' garage on the day I got my first go-kart. And when I walked out into the garage, I saw it sitting there and I said, I've waited my whole life to be 5. Which, I mean, honestly, it was a good statement because I didn't realize that would be the rest of my life as far as I could tell. But so far, I've raced in 6 different countries, and that was all by the time I was 14. So that's Spain, Portugal, England, France, Belgium, Italy, Switzerland. I can't remember how many that is. That's quite a few. But so yeah, there's been a lot of time on the road. We used to be gone go-karting. So I started in go-karts, obviously, but that was 42 weekends a year that I was on the road go-karting. And there's a great book that's called Outliers. I actually recently posted a video on my social media about this, but it talks about the 10,000 hour rule. And you have to spend 10,000 hours doing whatever it is if you want to be great at it. And so my parents believed that they were going to give me that 10,000 hour mark by the time I was 14 years old in a go-kart. And I think that we achieved that. So that's a lot of the reason why I reached so much success in my early days. But one of the other reasons I reached success was I was having fun. You see that picture in that top middle, and that's me in my little white suit next to my driver coach at the time. And we used to set bottle rockets off in his backyard in between races. And on our track days, we would spend time doing more cookies than we would drive around the racetrack, because I thought that was fun in the rain. And one thing that he instilled in me was at an early age, you gotta have fun in order to be passionate and let that passion burn as you move on into your career. And so I felt very blessed to have fun along those journeys in those different countries, and really get to have the right people alongside me and the right people that believed in me. You see that bottom left picture, that's my dad wrenching away on my go-kart. He was my mechanic. My dad and my grandpa were my mechanics coming up through the ranks. That wasn't until I got into cars. But that meant plenty of lost tires. I spent a lot of time on 3 wheels instead of 4 because of them. I've been disqualified because the wrong fuel got put in the wrong cart at the wrong day. I've had restrictor plates that happened to fall into the motor in the wrong time, or fall out of the motor at the wrong time, and many other issues. But along the way, I learned to give some grace to my teammates because I had to go home with them that night. But also to love them through it, and they kind of had to live with me too, because I would make mistakes as well. So it was a way that we kind of work on each other and create some accountability when we got home, and still learn to live a life that was, enjoyable. But along with that, my mom, who I like to call my momager, has played a bigger role in the later years now. She's my manager a lot of times, and she's the one that's going on behind the scenes making everything happen. It takes a team of people to make a race car driver do his job. It's not just me getting in the car and making it go fast. There's a team, a race team, there's a marketing team, there's a managing team. And so my mom has kind of been the leader in that. And that's actually day one at the racetrack in the bottom right there, her putting my gloves on. And my mom and my dad have both been very impactful in my life. My dad has only ever missed 1 race. And the reason for that was because he was in the hospital trying not to die. And he was still on the phone with us every 30 minutes telling us what we were doing wrong. Couldn't get So yeah, I feel very blessed to have those two in my life. But like I said, it's the teams that have believed in me, and also the investors. Racing is a very expensive sport, and I would be ashamed to tell you guys if there was any other way. But my parents owned a small grocery store right on the Idaho-Oregon border, and I used to go in and throw freight in between race weekends. And my dad and I would work through the night to throw the freight out so we could order the next day. And then he would work on my cart after driving a 12-hour trip to Canada. And so there's a lot of time spent behind the scenes earning the right to be there. But by the time I got into cars, we had to rely on investors. And so those investors are the reason that I'm here today, and also the reason why I got to live my dream. Sweet. So here's a video here, and I'm gonna play it for you guys. This is at the Nashville Grand Prix, and just give you an insight to what a race weekend might look like.
Talk about real. I seen a man's whole bad hill. I seen a woman drooling out the mouth. I seen the demons in the casket out. I seen my brother throw his whole vape in the lakes. He smooth healed from the dark. I seen the spirit change my own heart. Can't tell it all, but this a good start. K to the second letter.
We see green here in Nashville.
They ain't never been realer. I am not shook, I'm aligned in chiller. My face blue still, I ain't never been stiller. Ooh, Kelly ain't gotta get bigger. To the dark spots, wake up. I didn't make up this God, the divine concealer. On the bread of heavens, like the red and black 11s, walking through the pearly gates. Popping through the most, I'm in the Holy Ghost. I'm looking like the Pope, swerving race. They gon' get the word today. I send a text back, never curved the fate. Jesus, curses break. Slaves get freed and the words away.
So for many of you, you probably think that I just sit in the car and turn it left and right and make it go fast down the straightaways. Well, there's more to it than just that, and I've actually written this. I'm working on writing a book right now, actually, and I'm hoping to publish it sometime in this lifetime. But this is a little snippet that I wrote at one point, so I'll read it to you guys. And it's about what I do. So my job was to find the limit of what the car can give. Without a driver that is willing to cross over the line of their previously understood area of success into a new area of potential failure, loss is already inevitable. The driver, in their lack of knowledge, must press into the overambitious speeds, dancing on disaster. That point of failure where the line blurs from not going fast enough into being out of control is where the driver must stand, where they must thrive. And that just goes to show you guys that what we're doing behind the scenes is more than just steering it left and right. A lot of times we're risking the $500,000 race car that we're driving. We're risking our lives at times. Luckily, safety measures have increased in the last few years, so I got to test those this last season, crashed quite a bit. Dancing on the edge of disaster, I was more running past it and waving by. But I learned that lesson, and so I'm learning to thrive there now. But another part of my job is managing relationships. Part of that is with my engineers, mechanics, owners, drivers, sponsors. A lot of what I do is I have to be a leader, which is kind of funny because as a 22-year-old, my engineers are usually over the age of 50 and have been in the racing industry way longer than I've been alive. And so they usually humble me by showing me all the experience and notoriety they have, and making sure that I, don't think that I'm getting beyond myself. But also I have to challenge the people around me. If I'm stagnant in what I'm doing, then the people around me are not going to be willing to put the work in to get a fast race car, as well as to put me in the race car. So a lot of what I do is, like I said, managing and challenging people. And for those of you that don't know, IndyCar is a big series. It's not just the Indy 500 where we have 400,000 live in attendance race fans. There's 70 million IndyCar fans worldwide. And so that means that we're in the entertainment industry. And so a lot of what I do behind the scenes is interviews. It's maintaining my image and trying to make sure that I'm being a good representation of the brands around me, good representation of the teams around me, and my investors, my partners. And so I've learned in the last few years that it's okay to say no to some interviews. During the year of May, I like to call it now, I was doing interviews from 7 in the morning and finishing up my final sponsor dinner at 8 p.m. And it was nonstop all day. And so that's something that will continue, I'm sure, but I'm learning how to enjoy those a lot more. I used to just want to sit in the race car. Camden up here probably experiences that as well. Driving race cars are a lot more fun than doing speaking engagements, but it has its place. And then you see that entertainment monetized. That's the entertainment industry, and how do I make money doing that? A lot of what we're doing is not just driving race cars. We have to be a brand ourselves, and so that means going and selling myself to a brand, a company, a sponsor, an investor, and trying to pitch them on what I'm going to do for them and what I can provide for them. A lot of what I do as well is problem solving. There's not necessarily a book written about how to become a race car driver, and so a lot of it is figuring it out on the fly, and also figuring out how to make the car go faster on the fly. There's no absolutes in racing, and so a lot of times what we have to do is we have to creatively think in order to problem solve based off past experiences and also engineers' knowledge, and try and connect all the dots, and hopefully it ends up with a fast race car. So my legs were tired after that 20-mile hike, I will say that. But I do work out quite a bit, and a lot of what I do, and I think that you saw that in that Nashville video, after the race got out of the car and I poured water on my head. Did you guys see that? Everyone saw that? Yeah. Well, the reason for that was because the in-car cockpit temperature was 130 degrees for that race. And that was a 2.5, 3 hour race. And so I was in the car without power steering at 130 degrees for 2.5, 3 hours. And so that means that the heat plus a high heart rate equals brain fade. And you see that up there. Wow. Now, my heart rate is on the right-hand side there, that little graph. And that's not a very good image for you guys because that's from my Indy Lights days. And that was about an hour-long race, 45-minute long race, actually. But you can see my peak at 180. Well, if you stretch that out to double the length, you can see what my heart rate would be like in an IndyCar race. And so a lot of what we do is trying to avoid that brain fade. And so when I'm training, a lot of endurance athletes, they'll train like a runner. A runner runs to get a runner's high, and when they get that runner's high, they can run further and faster because it kind of allows them to log out, if you will. They're clocked out and they're just hitting the rhythm. Well, in racing, when that happens, you hit walls. And so the goal is to be able to consciously think through the problems, but drive in a flow state. And so you have to train to a level that's much higher than what you would normally do because you're trying to train past that which you're going to experience in the race car. Now, here's a little video of me for strength training. This is at Pit Fit in Zionsville, doing some deadlifts. Not too impressive, but for myself, I was pretty happy with it. You can see my fist pump there at the end. But a lot of what we do is also neck exercises, which I like to call neck-exercises. And so a lot of the experience that we have in the car is the G-forces. And so a lot of times I'll sit around in the gym, just nodding back and forth with a weight attached to try and build up my neck strength so that when I go around a turn, I don't do this. I want to make it vertical. Like I said, the cardio that we experience is around 135 to 180 beats per minute in the race car for that 3-hour period. And then also the strength is a big factor as well. With no power steering, our grip strength has to be very good. And when you get sweaty gloves in the car when it's 130 degrees, you get plenty of blisters. And so you gotta be able to have that grip strength in order to hold on to the wheel. Some guys use custom steering wheel grips so they don't have to hold on as tightly. I don't. I think those are for wusses. But maybe next year I won't. I'm learning my lessons this year. And now the brake pressures, I think what really surprises the people the most. A lot of times I'll get leg cramps in the race. I struggled with an IT band this last year because I was hitting the brakes so hard for such a long race. I had never experienced that much strain on my leg for that period of time. But the brake pressure is like doing a single leg press at around 200 pounds at the peak. And so a lot of times what you'll see, and I'll show you guys a graph later, but when we hit the brakes, we're trying to do it fast and hard. And then as we get into the corner, we release slowly. So you do a lot of isometric and explosive workouts in order to maintain that brake pressure through a race so that you can manage the car's balance entering or exiting the turn. And then you see that picture with me wearing the goggles and that stick thing. That's a reaction drill that we do at Pit Fit, which is the gym that I train at. And those goggles, they're actually blacking out my vision for a split second. And so what they'll do is they'll toss me that stick thing and tell me red, blue, or green, and I have to grab whatever end of that stick is that color. But my vision's blacked out for part of that. So I have to make sure that I'm tracing it, following it, and maintaining that path with my eyes so that when it reappears, I know where I'm at. And a lot of the same thing happens in the race car because as you're going through downtown streets, you can't see around the next corner because the walls are taller than the race car. And so you have to see through the turn, is what we like to say. Look through it. And that part of that is knowing what's ahead. And so having that blacked out vision helps us to train as we're anticipating what's to come instead of reacting. So I got some videos here of me reacting. This was not an anticipation, but a reaction. So I'm gonna play that again. I'll show you right where I pooped my pants. It's right there. That's where I had some brown shorts that day. Now the next video was me beginning of the season when my reactions were not so good and sharp, but there's a bit more chaos from the start here. So you can see here what I was thinking. Right here, I see the car in front of me going to the right, and in my mind, I'm going, oh man, opening on the left, 2 free spots, here we go. And about here, I see this car looking back at me and I panicked. So I'll lock it down, back it up sideways. We're now drifting in an IndyCar, which is pretty impressive in itself. I'll try not to run into the car in front of me. And about here, I see the other car in the wall, think I'm clear, and then I had launched this guy into the air into the wall because I didn't see him out of my blind spot there. So the good thing about this is that I learned how to be patient, because Connor Daly right there decided to wait a half second, let the cars clear out, and then he snuck through without any damage. So veteran move on his part. Props to Connor. I learned a lesson that day.
Wow.
So a lot of what we do behind the scenes is preparation, and that's mechanical and engineering preparation. You see that picture where we're all lined up in a row smiling, and that mirror that we're looking in is actually the bottom side of the race car. That's our skid plate right before the Indy 500. It's polished like perfectly like a mirror. And so a lot of the preparation that goes on behind the scenes for teams starts now for the Indy 500. We have a separate race car for the 500 that is just going to be for that one race. The rest of the time we're racing in what we call like the beater car. We don't care if we crash them as much, it's not as valuable, but it's still important. And then you can see on the right hand side, that top right, that's me getting fitted for my custom seat. And so the way they do that is they pour a bunch of foam beads into a plastic bag, and they vacuum seal it, pour epoxy to mix all together, have me sit in it, and then I sit there for about an hour, try and move the beads in the right spot so that when I get back in the car the next time, I have support where I need it. So when we're pulling 4.5, 5 Gs, I'm not just using my core muscles for 3 hours and falling apart in the race car. But the best teams are the best for a reason. A lot of that is the personnel, the people that are there. Teams are not the best because of the logo on the side of the race car. It's the people that are involved in making the car go fast. And it's the consistent personnel, the experienced personnel, the proactive personnel. And a lot of times you'll see lower level teams that seem to get the new fast guys or the new good engineers, and those engineers move away quickly into the higher ranking teams because the higher ranking teams know that you have to have the consistency of a good experienced engineer. And the lower level teams just can't hold on to them that long. So you have to be proactive, like I said. A lot of that is maintenance. A lot of that is knowing what the car needs ahead of time. As the temperature increases, what do you do with the wings? Well, the air gets thinner, so you need to decrease the wing angle. And so there's a lot of different things behind that. And they have a lot of different parts as well. The parts development behind the scenes on the good teams is just that much better because they have more resources. You see that left picture there of that little dyno. That's a damper dyno. And now in IndyCar, we run in the spec series. And so a lot of what we do are the same from car to car. At least that's what they say, right? So we're all driving a Dallara chassis with either a Honda or a Chevy engine. Well, if that's the case, then why aren't they all the same speed? Well, that damper dyno right there is one of the key components in what makes a car handle properly. So what they can do is they can simulate a racetrack. Let's say Nashville, for example, because that's a track that you've seen today. And they can simulate the bumps on it, on that damper dyno, and figure out what the best frequency is for that dyno's, the damper's compression and rebound. So that when we get to the track, we're maintaining a contact patch with the tire on the pavement for the whole racetrack, instead of just parts of it where it's skipping across. Now, engineers know the tendencies of a racetrack and have specific baseline setups for each track. We're not going to go to Nashville with our Indy 500 setup. Tried that? No, I haven't. But that would be bad. And so a lot of what we do ahead of time as the preparation is we look at what's worked in the past. And so we're rolling off the truck with a setup that's specific for that racetrack and specific for those conditions based off the experience and the knowledge of the engineers. Now, wheel rate, you see that definition down there on the bottom, has to do with that graph right there, or the picture of the back half of the car. Wheel rate is a measure of the effective stiffness of the suspension system measured at the wheel center. Now, I'm a race car, so I'm not going to pretend to know what that means. That's the engineer's job. But you can see that the highlighted parts, they all play into how the car handles. And now, you see on the A-arm, this piece here, there's several different bolt locations where that can move. Well, that moves the roll center up and down. And when we move that roll center up and down, we have to change the spring rate, which are those coil springs that you see, as well as the ARB, which is the roll bar, that T at the back half of the car. And that all plays together to making the car handle more consecutively. So this is a picture of the data analysis that we do behind the scenes. So like I said, a lot of what we do is problem solving. My job is to work with engineers to make the race car go faster. And so we're spending a lot of time looking at data. And so this is the data that I look at most of the time, which is more effective for the driver. This is at Long Beach, which is the track we go to. And now you see that big sweeping black line, that's our speed trace. And you can see as we go into a brake zone and go towards the back half of that, there's a spike downwards and then it returns to the normal line. Well, that's a wheel lockup. So as we're braking, you'll get certain wheels locking up with the way that the car's bouncing or rolling. And so we try to avoid that. And then on the bottom line, you have the blue, which is the throttle, and the red, which is the brake. And you can kind of see that brake shape that I was talking about earlier with a big hit to start, and then the trail off as we enter the corner. And the reason that we do that, the reason that we don't just do one normal hit and then release, is because when I brake, the car pitches onto the nose, and that gives the car rotation. So as I'm steering, the car's actually sliding at a yaw angle across the racetrack. Now this is probably a lot of gibberish, but what it means is that I'm controlling the way the car's handling with the brake pedal and controlling the balance of it and how much I needed to turn per corner. Now it all plays into the engineering behind the car as well, but it's the driver's job. That's what separates good drivers from bad drivers, is how they manipulate the brake, and that affects the rest of the turn. Now, I would have to tell you guys this prayer that we prayed before the race. This is my spiritual preparation. I told you about the mechanical, physical, and now the spiritual preparation. But this is a prayer that my mom and my family pray over me before every race, and that's God give them eyes to see the path, wisdom to go forth, and speed to get there. And they pray that for me since I was in go-karts. But a lot of what it is this vision, strategy, and execution. And you hear that a lot of times in companies. Any major business is going to have a vision for what they want to achieve, a strategy for executing that, and then they're going to have that knowledge in order so that when the opportunities arise, they can go out and achieve those. And so for me, that's the prayer, is that I would have the vision to see the opportunities on the racetrack. I would have the strategy, the knowledge, the skills that I need in order to achieve those opportunities, and the execution to run through those open doors as fast as possible, because they open and close very quickly. So here's a video showing some of those open and closed doors and where they come and go. And this is at Nashville in my Indy Lights days.
Trying to one more time. McElray trying to defend that position, and we'll do it once again. Stingray's got a great run here.
So right here, I'm looking for the open door on the left-hand side, but my teammate doesn't realize that.
Looks to the inside.
And right there, I thought I hit the wall because we touched. You can see where the wall ends, and I open up. He goes back to the left as I go back to the left, looking for that open door. A little bit of a juke there. You know what that means. And then right up the inside.
Still gonna swing back around, but maybe the damage is to McElray. Sting Ray Robb has got through on Hunter McElray. Yeah, I'm gonna get Sting Ray is saying, hey, this isn't maybe any room right here. Yeah. You get it blowed down, and Sting Ray still sitting up the inside.
So that prayer, the vision, strategy, and execution, came very applicable right there, because I had two closed doors before I got my open one. And that happens a lot of time on the racetrack. So that's a constant prayer for my safety, for my knowledge, for my skills, and it keeps me humble as well.
Here is Sting Ray Robb.
Now for the fun part. We've talked your ear off so far, but this is what I really enjoy, and that's part of the problem solving, is finding the solution. And that's where really things start to come together. And that comes from collaborating with engineers, trying to problem solve. And when you find that right setup, it makes it so the car practically drives itself. On the best days, you don't know why you're driving fast, it just happens. And you've put the work in every other day, but today's the day. And I've had days where I didn't remember driving the car that day. And when they said, what were you thinking about when you were in the car? I said, I was wondering what I was going to have for dinner. And it's kind of funny because that flow state, I don't think comes on accident. I think that a lot of that comes from putting the time in, being physically prepared, being spiritually prepared, being mechanically prepared. So when I get in the car, everything works together. And one of my other favorite things is hunting down the next driver and winning. But hunting down the next driver, I want to show you guys an onboard video from Barber, which was in Alabama this last year. This is from the race start, plus a couple of laps. So you guys get to see what it's like behind the wheel a little bit. So there you can see I defended the inside because there were drivers behind me that were going to go up the inside. And I learned my lesson from previous races that you defend so you don't get wrecked into. And so this is me covering that inside line so that I could wreck into someone instead of someone wrecking into me. I didn't do that here though. We made it through. Now again, I'm defending the outside because there's now someone on the inside because I didn't defend well enough. And you'll see that carry through the whole turn. So I had to leave them in open lane to come into here. They're still there. So I still have to leave them room. And it cost me the line down the straightaway as well. Now this is my favorite section coming up. It's a roller coaster. I thought that was an open door. It was not. So one of the things that goes into engineering as well is you're seeing it right here to this turn especially because it's a downhill decreasing radius turn. And what that means is that the angle that I'm steering at is not equal to the angle that the car is turning at. So that's called understeer. So you see I have my hands pretty much over the top of one another and the car is just not turning. And that was something that we were struggling with that weekend. And so that's called understeer. And that would affect how I got out of the turn. So you'll see me be pulled away from the driver in front of me going down this next straightaway because of it. Now you see those green lights on my dash right there on the sides? That's the push to pass. So that's an extra 50 horsepower I'm activating in order to close that gap for the next brake zone. There you go. That was a bit of a lame maneuver, but that's always fun when you're hunting someone else not being hunted. That was one of my favorite passes of the year just because it was from so far back. Yeah. But these pictures up here, that's really the fun part. That's the winning process. Being on track, I think, is more fun than celebrating, but it is very cool. This is me on the podium, giving the glory to God after that victory. That was at Laguna Seca in 2022 when I got my first Indy Lights win. And that was the largest margin of victory by a driver that year. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that because that was the first weekend I'd given the opportunity up to God. And a lot of what I struggle with behind the wheel as a driver is I want to have control of the car. And I want to control the surroundings around me, which is a good thing. If they were out of my control, it would probably be very bad. But one of the things that I've been working with, I have a life coach that I work with, is to give God control, give God the results, and think of myself, not in the first person, that this is all for me, this is all for my glory, this is all for my win, it's all for my stats, but this is for God's glory. Think of myself in the third person. I'm just a pawn in his play. And so that was a day I was a pawn in his play, and he let me stand on top of the podium. So that's me. That was the week that I turned 21, so it was my first champagne spray instead of Martinelli. And then that group that you see up there, that's my family, my friends, and investors and partners up there, and that's about half of the people that showed up for that race weekend, which was pretty cool. Now, I'll say this, racing has the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And I say that because we're competing for what seems like our lives are on the line. It feels like we're going to war. And I know it's no comparison to war because we're just driving race cars, but it feels like on the day of a race. And in it all, my identity cannot be found in the results. That win cannot define who I am, who I was. Because if I let that define who I was, I'm going to be vastly disappointed when it comes to my performance the next day. And that next day is that low. That's me in the top right, right after hitting the wall at Indy 500 on lap 92. And I can't let that define who I was either. And as much as I would like to blame that on someone else or something else, I'm the one that was driving the car that day. And it was my result. But that's not who I was. That was just the thing that happened to me on that day and the thing that I did that day. And so I have to keep my focus on, like I said, not the first person, but that third person, and be a pawn in God's play. And that's taught me a lot. You see that tire bouncing on the racetrack right there. That's my wheel. And my dad and my grandpa didn't put that one on. That was actually the race team that did that. But it's at the Iowa races last year. We had 2 tires fall off in 2 days. And that was because of a new guy on the car. It was his first day doing the air jack. And so the car got set down pretty quickly, actually. I was pretty surprised by the pit stop time. Just unfortunate the pit stop was not complete at that time. So as I left the box, I saw my left rear wheel bouncing down the racetrack next to me. Not recommended. Not an easy way to drive a race car on a racetrack. But I've learned to have grace for my teammates as much as I've had to give grace to myself. And so that identity is not just for myself, but it's also the way that we love others. And so I've learned that through all of this that I can be someone different. I don't have to be the angry race car driver that flips the camera off when I get out of the race car and wants to go fight the next driver that drove me off the racetrack or cuss out my engineer when he had a bad day. Because I have bad days too. But the grace that God gives us is not just for us, it's for the people around us. And that's something that I learn every day when I'm in the race car. And I think that is my presentation. So I'll do a little Q&A if you guys want. If you have some questions, we'll just jump around. Yeah.
You were showing some of those races. What were some of the speeds that you were going during that time?
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and we can look at some of the video there if you want. I'll say this, our top speed at the Speedway during the Indy 500 is around 240 miles an hour. And then on a typical road or street course, we're doing about 180 at the end of the straightaway. So it's actually, you can see the speed in that bottom left corner there, along with my throttle and brake trace and what gear I'm in. So you guys just watch that, and you can tell me what speed you see. So I think I was sideways at 155, but there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, around 180 is probably normal for road and street courses, and then quite a bit over 200 for the ovals.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go in the back, yeah.
So, a lot of us think the month of May is the best month of the year.
Am I going to get chased out of here if I disagree?
Now, was Illinois or Richmond or any competitors able to prepare you somewhat for what to expect, or how did your month of May go?
Yeah, I mean, that's about how my month of May went. I crashed 2 cars in 2 races. So I like to call it the year of May. At least that's what it felt like this year. And I think that the people that I had around me, they told me what I was going to experience and what I would need to expect. A little bit, but there's nothing like it until you get there. I mean, those 7 to 8 p.m. days, those are long days, and it's not just in the race car, those are away from the race car, and that's the whole entire month. So a lot of what we're doing is exhausting even before the race day. The race day is just a result of your preparation. I mean, when we were going into the 500, I didn't know if I was going to make it into the qualifying. I was one of the last row qualifiers, and going into that, we were flat. I mean, that was all the juice that we had to give, and we didn't know why. And so it's not just the physical tax, it's also the mental tax. I mean, you have to show up every day at 100%, ready to problem solve, ready to work with engineers, ready to manage those expectations and those relationships. And so I think that there's no one out there that can really prepare you. There's people that kind of lead you through it. And I will say that I wish I had someone with recent experience that was able to lead me through it. My teammate was worrying about his deal, so he wasn't helping me that much. He was just trying to survive as well. But I'll tell you that going into this next year, I do have better expectations just because I have that experience now and that knowledge and have that expectation of what to see when I get into the month of May. Good question.
Do you listen to comments on the race after the race?
Do I? Yeah, so I have a radio in the car that the team can talk to me with. And so they're updating me on tire strategy, fuel strategy, race pace. There's cars around me for the 500 or other ovals. We have spotters, which are our eyes in the sky. Those are the guys that are seeing the whole racetrack for us and kind of paint the picture, trying to guide us when we're going 240, not trying to run into other guys. So those are the comments that I get during the race. And then after the race, sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch the race back on TV. I try to avoid doing that if it was a bad race, because I don't want to go through that again. But this last year I had a lot of criticism, and so I avoided Twitter and YouTube because those were my demise for much of the year. But I've since gone back and watched them and laughed with the folks as well. So I do see the comments.
I can't remember who it was, but he said that when he introduced your name to the TV audience during time trial, right? That's a great name.
Yeah. The name I think gets people excited for sure. There was we did the 500 parade around downtown, and I was next to Jack Harvey and Graham Rahal. Well, I don't think Graham Rahal liked that very much because there was more StingRay shirts around than there were Graham Rahal shirts. So I was pretty excited to see that, and they weren't shirts that we had sold. People had just put my face on a T-shirt that they had at home with Sting Ray Robb on it. So that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, I think the name helps with getting people excited. Yeah.
You do a lot of preparation for the racing part. What do you do spiritually? Is there other guys out on the track that you guys get some spiritual time together? Do you guys do like devos out there, or what's the spiritual aspect? Because I've seen there's like lots of religions out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think I'm the only professing Christian in IndyCar right now as far as the drivers go. But there is IndyCar Ministries, and they're at the track every weekend, or they're every day, and they do a devotional before the race weekend. I don't usually make it to those because I'm usually napping at that time, trying to rest up for the race weekend. But there are guys in the paddock that I can kind of lean on in that sense. But a lot of it is the preparation ahead of the race weekend. I mean, if you're already in the race weekend, it's too late. You got to be ready for it ahead of time. So a lot of that is spending time in my small group. I go to Traders Point downtown because that's close to me. I literally walk to church every day. But there's a group of guys I meet with there, as well as I kind of lean on my family. I was homeschooled growing up, and so I actually was homeschooled by a lady from our local church, and she poured in me a deep spiritual connection, and she's a lot of the reason why I have the faith that I have, but also my family, and so I lean on that and them a lot of the time. This whole man-to-man thing, this iron sharpens iron, it's so important, and I get worn out during the racing season because I don't have this connection a lot of time, and so this is my job during the off season to be doing things like this. Leaning on other men and pouring into myself spiritually, reading the word and being prepared for the next season to come.
What's your favorite track?
What's my favorite track? I like the tracks that I win at.
Good answer.
Now the last track that I won at actually is my favorite racetrack. That's Laguna Seca, California. I really like tracks that have a lot of elevation change, decreasing radius, off-camber corners, banked corners, elevation change, all that stuff, because it just throws another dynamic at the race car, and you don't really have time to overthink it, and I'm really good at that. So a flat track or an oval, it's way too much time to myself, and I don't like that so much. I like to drive more off of, like I said, that unconscious flow state, and it's harder for me to get that at other tracks. So road courses with a lot of elevation change, that's what I like. Good question. Yeah.
Do you have any race car heroes when you were growing up, or do you have people that are favorite race car drivers?
Yeah, I definitely looked at other race car drivers growing up. I mean, that's kind of how I got inspired. I don't think anyone in particular. When I was younger in go-karts, so there was a movie that came out called Senna, and that was about a driver named Ayrton Senna in Formula One, and he passed away in the early 90s. But I really was moved by that movie, because honestly, it was a great movie, documentary actually, but also just kind of the way that he lived his life, like ragged edge, pushing it every day he was in the car. I specifically remember he won a race where the car was stuck in 6th gear, and he got out of the car and he wasn't even able to unbuckle himself. And so for me, I was like, that's the dude I want to be. I want to be like the Michael Jordan of racing, right? Like, or the Larry Bird. Larry Bird of racing. But yeah, just putting it out, all out there, and also he had a faith as well, and it's kind of crazy. In the documentary, it kind of talks about it because the day that he died, he didn't want to get in the race car, and the reason he said was because he was praying the night before and he had a vision that he was going to die that day, and so that to me is crazy. But I think that his impact, I hate to say that he died for a purpose, but I really do think he did. I think that God had a purpose and it doesn't mean that wasn't an accident, but I think that God can use those moments to change people's lives. And I think he did that day. I think he showed his faith on the forefront and also his skill and talent. And that was really cool. Yeah.
How many active IndyCar drivers are in the world?
How many active IndyCar drivers in the world? So I think there's 28 full-time race car drivers or IndyCar drivers. And I think there's only 8 Americans. So I'm one of 8 and one of 28. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Did Steve tonight watch the F1 race in Vegas?
Oh man, I might record that one. Well, the F1 race in Vegas will be interesting. I've heard a lot of good things, but I've also heard a lot of interesting things with it being as cold as it is. I think they figured the desert was going to be a lot warmer, but it's not the case. Welcome to America. We got crazy weather here, so. Yeah.
When I was growing up as a kid, around Indianapolis, there was Offenhauser and Novi engines and Fords, and even Parnelli Jr. for turbine engines. It seemed to be a little more innovative back then. Is that a proper interpretation of what racing is now?
That's a very, very good question. It's kind of funny. I actually raced with Parnelli's grandson in go-karts, Jagger and Jace Jones. So those are good guys over there. But yeah, I think the innovation that we see in racing nowadays is a lot different because it's at least in IndyCar, it's a spec series, and so we're limited on what we can do. But it also allows more creativity in certain areas because you're limited. You don't have this broad image of what's achievable, and so you don't get lost in the sauce per se. You know, a lot of it is like very micro focused, and so you're dealing, like I said, with those damper packages where you're trying to get the most out of that single damper and making it perfect. And other parts are just terrible. I mean, it's just the way it is. So if you look at Formula One, the innovation of Formula One is much higher because it's an open series, and they have those multiple engine manufacturers, like you're saying, multiple chassis manufacturers, aero manufacturers. So you have McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, all those guys, they're building their own parts. And so if you're a bearing guy on Red Bull's F1 race team, that's all you do. You build the left front bearing and you make that thing perfect. And if you're the rear wing guy, there's probably 4 of you, and you better make that rear wing perfect for that racetrack on that weekend. IndyCar, because they try and cut costs and make it a more competitive series, they have that spec, so they don't have the innovation behind the scenes, and they don't have as large of a crew. And so it allows more flexibility for teams to be competitive, and that's why you see teams at lower budgets competing at a higher level versus Formula One, where it's Red Bull and Max Verstappen every weekend. And that's not to say that Alex Palou didn't dominate this last year, but there's reasons for that too. I mean, they put the time and effort in, and I'm sure they got creative in some way or another, just based off of watching video and whatnot. They figured something out, the rest of the guys didn't. Good question. Anyone else? Yeah.
How many people are on your crew, and what are they doing when you're not racing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So how many people are on our crew? So different than NASCAR, my tire changers and gas guy and jack guy, they're also my mechanics. Whereas NASCAR, they have specific individuals for each position. And so that's why you see ex-NFL linemen changing tires and throwing 100 gallons in the race car. Because they need those athletes to change tires and get the job done fast. And then they have mechanics back at the garage to fix the car when it's damaged or get it ready to go. Whereas my guys, they're doing it all. And so I'm gonna count out loud here, but I got 4 tires. There's 4 tire changers. I got a gas guy, I have a jack guy, and I have a tear-off guy. Those are the guys that are over the wall, the ones that are in the pit box with me when I come into the pit stop. And then I got guys behind the wall as well. I have a sign guy that's just, his name's Dead Man Bob, because he's got the dead man, which is the thing that I'm aiming for. So that's 8, and then you have a tire grabber in the back, that's 9. I have, let's see, I have a strategist, that's 10, and 3 engineers, that's 13, plus another guy, sometimes 14. So I have around 14 guys that are on my car constantly. So those are the people that I'm dealing with day in and day out, trying to push and challenge and manage. It's a job and a half. Yeah.
Are simulators part of your training, or just for fun, or is that part of your training?
Yeah, so simulators do have a role. I mean, they allow us to learn racetracks, But a lot of times what we're dealing with when we arrive on a race weekend is not whether we're turning left or right. It's that last 1 or 2% that we're trying to look for. And that's the difference between first and last. And really, or first and second if you're Ricky and Bobby, but first and last. Yeah.
Yes, one thing I learned when we talked to you is how every season is almost like a restart for you. Talk about that. It's kind of something most of us aren't aware of, where you actually get 1-year contracts and have to find the team.
Yeah, that's a great question. So like I said, racing is a financially backed sport. And so that means that a lot of what we do depends on what the team's willing to give us a price for. And so coming up to the junior ranks, I had investors that would invest in me a certain amount of money, and it would change per season, and it would honestly change race to race. There was often times where I'd get on a plane with my dad, and my mom would say, hey, call me when you land, and I'll let you know if we have money in the bank. And we'd land, and she'd say, hey, so-and-so that knows so-and-so that knows so-and-so called, and they want to invest enough for just enough for this race weekend. You're going to have to cut a set of tires out of the weekend, but you can race. And so a lot of times coming up to the junior ranks, you're doing 1-year contracts because you don't know what the next year is going to hold. And so that means that I got turnover, right? I'm turning over engineers, mechanics, crew members, all that stuff. And it also means that when you come up to the junior ranks, you're hopefully being promoted as you go through the ranks. And so you're changing teams. You're also moving up into a different race car, so that means a different team completely. And then also in IndyCar, as a rookie, a lot of times you only get a 1-year contract to start. You have an option for a 2-year, but it's a bit of a risk on either end to sign a 2 or a 3-year deal, because that means that you might be stuck there if the team's really, really giving up, and they're taking your sponsor's money, and they're taking their investors' money, and they're not using it properly. So it allows some accountability between the driver and the team to sign 1-year contracts, but it also makes it really nerve-wracking during this time of the year. There's a lot of ambiguity about, as a driver, what are you going to do? Where are you going to be? Who's going to be your engineer? Who's going to be your strategist? And so that a lot of the offseason is spent figuring out all those details, as well as preparing for the next season. Let's see, I'm going to go some over here.
So how did you meet Molly Mitchell, and has Matt threatened your life?
Who was that guy last night?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't know. We've told this story probably. Yeah. Yeah, we had the initial version of this story that was less nerve-wracking for her parents, and then there was the creepy version, which is the one I'm going to tell you guys. But, I moved to Indianapolis in the beginning of 2022 as a race car driver, and my roommate moved here in January of 2022. I moved here in April, and when we moved here, we had no friends. We were so lonely. I shared a bedroom with my dad. The worst time ever. Don't recommend. And like I said, no friends. I mean, all we did was drive to and from racetracks, and then we're miserable in the meantime. And so it was during the month of May, actually, and we had an apartment downtown that had access to the canal. And so we just walk out our front door and be able to walk to Kroger, walk to the canal. And so my roommate and I, we'd go all over the place, just walk out the front door, go for walks all the time. Well, one day we walked out the door and we saw Molly and her roommate and 2 of her friends, I think. And now knowing they were going to a concert, and when we saw them, we were like, friends. And so we didn't chase them down then. We were playing the long game here, trying to be smart. It wasn't smart. But we figured out, because we walked to Kroger almost every day to the grocery store for dinner and whatnot, and their apartment's right there on the way. Well, we figured out if the blinds are open, they're home. And if the blinds are closed, they're not home. And so we walked to Kroger one day, or we get back from somewhere, I don't really remember, but saw the blinds were open. And so my roommate and I were like, let's just go say hi, right? So we go and knock on the door, and no answer, but the blinds are open. So we knock again a little louder so they can hear us. And Molly comes to the door. She kind of opens it up a little bit, and she's like, hello? We're like, hey, we're your 2 door down neighbors. Just wanted to come over and introduce ourselves. We're from Idaho. And then my roommate's name is Stafford, and he was the one making the introduction. And he's like, and this is Sting Ray. And I'm sure Molly's panicking right now. So I'm getting a drink here.
Lost in the sauce.
Yeah, lost in the sauce for sure.
And now knowing her side of the story, she was she's a runner, obviously, and she was trying to figure out if she could outrun us to the panic button in her room. Because there was these two creepy dudes from Idaho that gave her fake name standing on her phone. So we continued the conversation, trying to breeze past that one, and my roommate goes, well, is your roommate home? Because we wanted to meet the whole plan, right? She says no. Bad idea.
Yeah.
Anyways, we weren't there to kidnap her or make a murder case or anything like that, but we did invite her and her roommate over for tea at some point, and they didn't talk to us for about a week. I'm sure they were creeped out by all of that. But our neighbors on the other side of us, they're a young couple with a kid. We used to take their dogs on a walk, and so we were out, we brought the dog back one day, and Molly was, I think, borrowing a rolling pin from the wife. And the husband said, hey, have you guys met? And we're like, yeah, a little bit. So we got the green light from them, and then I think it was the week after we met, we went frog gigging for the first time. And I knew I was in for the long run here, at least while they were having me around. So a little taste of hunting from home, but it was a new adventure, Indiana frog gigging. So yeah, that's how we met.
I want to answer this. So, how many of you are fathers of daughters? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to make all of you a big fan of Sting Ray. So, the Molly story is a little bit different, and she's a fabulous storyteller. So, if you get a chance, ask her. But nonetheless, they were actually real good friends, Molly and Hannah Stafford and Sting Ray, for a period of time. And I think it was right before you were going to Thermal Club. I think he asked Molly out on a date. Okay. So, of course, that was big news in the Mitchell household. So they went on the date like the day before Sting Ray went to the Thermal Club before the IndyCar season. And I think maybe a couple of dates they went on or so, but Sting Ray sends me a text and says, hey, there's a time that I need to chat with you and Michelle. And so we arranged a time or so forth. I think you might have been out of town, so it was a phone call, but Sting Ray called Michelle and I. We're sitting in the living room. And he says, hey, I just want to ask your permission to make Molly, or ask Molly to be my girlfriend. He said, I've got a strange profession, so I want to be able to answer any questions. So he manned up, he called the dad, and asked to date his daughter before he dated his daughter. So if you're a father of daughters, this is the kind of guy that you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, one last question for you is that how can we be praying for you as a body and as men?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Like I said, right now there's a lot of ambiguity going on in my life. I figured out where I'm going to live this next year, so that's great. We're moving into a new house December 1st. And then just pray for the team contract to be done, because that's something that's ongoing. We thought that we would have an announcement out about 4 weeks ago, but little nuances are dragging it out. So praying for that, and then also just praying that God would use this next season for not just for myself, but for the people around me. We've been partnered with a great guy. If you guys know the name Toby Mack, he's a Christian artist, DC Talk, but his manager has since come on with us and is going to help us do what we like to call Faith in the Fast Lane events. And we're going to try and have local music artists, whether it be young artists, or just have like a little worship session, and also just to talk about kind of similar to talk about racing, but also kind of provide the faith aspect as well for race fans, and trying to reach people that way. And so he's got a crew of people that are faith-based. They're going to be helping us kind of create an identity, not just around who I am, but like the brand that points back to God. So if you would just pray that would be used wisely, and that we would have the right the vision and strategy and execution for that. Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, Steve Kester, I think I saw you here earlier. You're still here. Would you come on up and just pray for that and for Sting Ray, and praise God for him and staff for finding a place to live. December you move in.
All right, just again, thank you for coming. Thank you, Sting Ray. Been very encouraging. So let's close in prayer. Father, we do just thank you for the time we've had this morning, and we just thank you for your love to us. We thank you that you have made us the way you have, creative, enjoy the creation that you've given us, and given us a love and a passion to do that. But we know oftentimes we can get that really way out of balance. And begin to enjoy the creation much more than the Creator. So Father, we pray for each man here, especially Sting Ray, given the profession you called him into. It can be a difficult atmosphere around him, but we do pray for him, and again, each man here, for the courage to stand for you in places it's not always easy, for boldness to speak of your name and give you the credit and the glory for all that you accomplish through us. We specifically pray for Sting Ray as he has a lot of decisions to make, as he works through all the business details. Pray that you would just give him wisdom, a clear vision of what you want for him.
Amen.
Pray you give him patience to wait on you, to open that door before him and close doors. Let him be able to just move with that. And again, each man here, we're not all called to be IndyCar drivers, but we're all called to stand faithfully for you because of your great love for us. So pray that we would be faithful to the calling that you have called us to. We'll be sure to give you the glory and the honor. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.